The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasies. Time the promo code SGPN to score up to $1,000 bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 70 free trial today by going to sportsgame.com. There's RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It is currently Tuesday afternoon, roughly 4:45 p.m. Eastern Time on September 17th. I'm Rosso, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to get into ATP events. We've been away for a couple weeks. We had the Davis Cup, which we did not cover, but either way, point is we are back because the ATP calendar resumes as we have two tournaments taking place in China. We have Chengdu and Hangzhou, so we're going to preview both those, which start very early on Wednesday. I believe they started around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. Eastern. So once again, the episode out pretty early, but tennis is back, so the show is back. And as a result, we're going to break down these two tournaments in a second. For that, though, do want to remind people once again to like, subscribe on YouTube, and a reminder as well, if you are still listening to the podcast audio only on Spotify or Apple, that's okay too. But don't forget to leave a rating and a review. So once again, if you are listening to the podcast, either through YouTube live stream, YouTube videos afterwards, or through Spotify or Apple, don't forget you can show some support. So please do so before you forget. Plus, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. A lot of great Tennis Gambling Podcast merch. We have sweatshirts, shirts, and mugs. All high quality, all affordable. Recommend checking it out to see if you find something that you like. And a reminder, we have other shows on the network that are in full swing, especially based on the football schedule, because we have the College Football Experience and of course the Sports Camp Podcast, which does every NFL game, ATS. Now, the war against corporate gambling is heating up, and SGPN does need you to do your part. If you could take a couple seconds to review the podcast, either Tennis Gambling Podcast or really any podcast with the network, don't forget to share through word of mouth or just by letting other people know in general on social media that you do enjoy the shows. So once again, don't forget the word of mouth is the heartbeat of SGPN. So please do your part in helping the growth of the SGPN brand. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the US Open final. I have to recap what happened in the last episode, starting off with the lock and dog picks. Unfortunately, it looked like we were going to sweep. Then we did not, but we did win the lock. We had Sinner first set -1.5 games. That was never in doubt at -115. He broke Fritz, I believe it was 3 times in the first set. He broke in the first game, gave it back, and then he broke another 2 times with the hell of it. So the point is, Sinner did cover the first set spread. However, did lose the dog. We had Sinner to win and both players to win a set, and Fritz was 1 game away. He was serving for the third set, and he choked it. And not only did he choke it, he got broken again to lose the set 7-5. So point is, Fritz couldn't even get us to a breaker. He was serving for the set, and then he blew it. So either way, point is picked up a loss there with the dog. Other than that, though, the match was pretty straightforward. Sinner won in straight sets, and you ended up seeing Fritz lose in his first ever ATP final. Not exactly a shock. I thought Sinner would win pretty comfortably. I had Sinner in 4, but I do think at the end of the day, Fritz had some chances. The issue was Sinner was just too solid, and it just felt like Sinner was constantly, I'd say succeeding. The longer the rallies went, it just felt like Sinner was never really missing his spots. Fritz wasn't serving as well as he'd hoped, and Sinner got the job done in straight sets. Pretty competitive straight sets, 6-3, 6-4, 7-5, but should have went to 4, then Fritz choked it away. So either way, point is a nice win for Sinner. First ever US Open title, and it's a second ever Grand Slam title, both happening this year, which means if we're doing the math at home, that means that Djokovic won 0 this year, Zverev 1-0, Medvedev 1-0, Ruud 1-0, and yet Sinner and Alcaraz each won 2. So if you want to talk about the future of tennis and where we're potentially heading, it does seem like Sinner and Alcaraz are going to be dominating the tour for probably the next decade, unless somebody else comes around. But we did see each of them win 2 Grand Slams. You saw Alcaraz win clay and grass, and you ended up seeing Sinner win both hardcourt Grand Slams. But nice win for him, and an overall nice tournament for Sinner. Got off to a bad start, losing the first set to McDonald. Then he dominated from that point forward. Did drop a set to Medvedev, and that was basically it. So Sinner dropped 2 sets in the entire event. Looked sharp. And, of course, after all the controversy surrounding him with the steroid cream stuff that happened in Indian Wells, nice job by him to keep his composure and to win his second Grand Slam title. Anyway, nothing else to really add for the U.S. Open. Point is, wanted to briefly mention, I know it happened a couple weeks ago. As for Davis Cup stuff, not much I really want to talk about, so I'm going to kind of skip over it. Point is, though, a nice job by Sinner, and ended up splitting the lock and dog picks. Anyway, now it's time to try to quickly think if there's anything else that's worth talking about. I don't really think so. I was trying to think if there was anything else that's really worth discussing, but I think it's just time to get into the actual preview of the events for the upcoming week. So starting off with Chengdu. So for this one, we had this event for the last couple of years. Recent winners, you had Zverev beating Safulin in a 3-set marathon last year. You saw Carreño Busta beating Bublik, and you saw Tomic beating Fognini. So if you're doing the math at home, that means you could obviously tell there were some COVID years where the event got skipped because Tomic hasn't won an ATP event in an eternity. So once again, you've had a couple of iterations of the event, but there was a bit of a gap there for a couple of years with COVID. So keep that in mind. But Zverev's defending champion, and he will not be here, so you'll not be getting a potential title defense from Zverev in this one. Now, for the actual game plan for the events, by the way, don't have quarter odds. So we're going to go straight into the outrights here, starting off with the actual odds for Chengdu. The favorite is Musetti right now, using DraftKings for the odds. Musetti's around 4-1. You have Shang at 6-1. You have Safulin at 8-1, who was the defending runner-up. You have Bublik at around 8-1, Sonego 9-1, Pericard is 12-1, George is 12-1, Jari 16-1, Hanfman's 18-1, Sun is 18-1. You have Muller at 18-1, Vukic at 20-1, Manarino 20-1, Kovacevic 22-1, and you kind of get the point. Anyway, point is, for the actual breakdown of the event, the courts here are pretty fast. I would say that they are in the top half, potentially even the top third of speed for actual courts. So keep that in mind. Might see a lot of holds in this one, and you might see a lot of, I'd say, quality serves dominate for the first couple rounds. So keep that in mind. You might get some breakers early. Point is, though, the court speed here is pretty fast, and I think that should be the case once again here in 2024. Now, for the actual path of the, I'd say, favorites for the event, starting off with Chengdu. I mentioned Musetti is the favorite. Now, he has a pretty decent draw. Not the easiest, though. Does have to face off against either Kotov or O'Connell in the second round, which should be a very, very entertaining match either way. That Kotov-O'Connell match should be a pretty solid one in the first round. But Musetti, I've mentioned it before, I will not be taking him in this event. I don't think he's a great hardcourt player. I know that we backed him a couple of times in the grass and clay season, but he's really not the best hardcourt player, mostly because the serve is not consistent enough. And with that being the case, I do think that Musetti might struggle to actually win the title as a favorite. So 4-1, I think, is a horrible price for Musetti, who has really never been a great hardcourt player. So I'm going to skip over him. Now, Shang is the second choice. Of course, he is the home country favorite because we're in China. However, the issue is he can't stay healthy. And I feel like I've mentioned this before. I tried to give out Shang to win the last event that he was in before the US Open, which I believe was Winston-Salem, and he got injured and he quit. So I can't really take Shang, especially at 6-1. I think those odds are pretty awful when you factor in how I'd say injury prone he actually is. I can't take him. Not to mention the fact that his overall path initially is brutal. First round, Nishikori, that's really tough, and then he has to face off against either Safulin or Fognini in the second round, then Bublik maybe in the third round. That's a really tough draw for Shang, so I'm going to pass on him. I'm going to have to pass on Nishikori as well, and Safulin as well. I think that draw is too difficult. I feel like that's going to be just a series of really competitive matches, and with that being the case, I kind of have to pass on Shang. Don't see any value there at 6-1. With an injury-prone player who has a pretty tough draw in the first couple rounds. Safulin, I just mentioned, not going to take him. Has kind of been underwhelming recently. He looked okay in Winston-Salem. Of course, ended up losing the final set breaker to Eubanks, but he has been fine. The issue is I don't trust the draw, and for him at least, I think it's pretty difficult, and I do think that Safulin at 8-1 is a bit cheap. Now, Bublik's one I'm going to actually be tempted by, which is going to make me sound like a hypocrite because he's in the same section. However, he's on the other side of that section. So Bublik has a bye, then either Muller or a qualifier. Meanwhile, Shang and Nishikori, Safulin, and Fognini are going to kill each other. Then whoever wins that face off against Bublik. So I'm hoping that Bublik can use the potential easy path of the first couple rounds to take advantage of potentially exhausted competitive opponent there in the third round. But Bublik, I said before, made it to a final here. Ended up losing to Busta in the final a couple years ago. But we know the serve's great. When he actually is engaged, he can win on almost any hard court because the serve's going to be that good. The problem is he's a head case. And since his solid grass season, he really hasn't done anything. Or I should say since he's really won Montpellier, he hasn't won anything for the entire season. But I do think you're looking at a spot where Bublik can maybe come out firing, especially on the fast courts here. I think Bublik at around 850 is a good price. So I am going to go with him as my first choice for the event. Yes, it is dangerous because he's Bublik, so if you want to pass on it, you can. But 850 compared to the prices of Shang at 6-1 and Safulin at 8-1, and they got to play each other first, I think is definitely the better price here. So give me Bublik at 850 as my first choice for the Chengdu outrights. Second one, though, I am going to go with the guy that we actually won with an outright a couple weeks ago, going with Sonego at 9-1. Now, unfortunately, it's not as good of a price as the last event we ended up winning with him, but I do like his draw, and I think 9-1 is a pretty favorable price for him. So he's on the other side of the bracket, and I got to mention it because I mentioned before that Musetti, I'm not sold on being the favorite of the event when he's not a great hardcore player, and we're looking at Jari, who is one of the favorites as well in the top half, and Jari's been terrible for months. So I feel like fading those two guys has some merit, or will have some merit, so I am going to go with Sonego, who I think is a decent draw. Daniel in the first round, decent favorite, then either Kovacevic or a qualifier, then either Jari, Walton, or Klein. So once again, Sonego actually has a pretty good draw to getting into the quarters. And at that point, I think he has the opportunity to potentially beat Musetti if they would face off head-to-head. So based on the, I'd say, skepticism that I have surrounding Jari and Musetti on hard court right now based on current form, and based on overall lack of, I'd say, resume quality in the Musetti case, I think that Sonego has value at 9-1. We saw him win a hardcore title a couple weeks ago. He looked great, and I think that he can perform well here again. And the draw is pretty favorable. Give me Sonego at around 9-1. Moving on to the next one. This is going to be the last one I'm going to go with. I really didn't pick any serious long shots. Thought about maybe making a case for Nishikori at 30-1 until I saw the draw. I thought Nishikori would have a decent opportunity to make it to like a quarter or a semi. Then I saw the draw, and that went right out the window. So if you had to go for a serious long shot here, 20-1 or higher, I mean, Manarino's funny. If you think that he's going to be able to get back on track, I think that could be interesting, but I'm not going to pick him. I think I am going to go, if I had to go for any long shot, I thought about Vukic, but he has Chorich in the first round, which is really not the easiest draw. Like, maybe if you want to buy low on Manarino, that could be an option, but I think I'm going to stay away from the serious long shots here. Instead, I'm going to go with the guy that actually won a title this year. It was his first ever ATP title. It was on clay. He's not been good lately, but he is a good server, and with the speed of the courts, I think that could translate well. I am going to go with Perricard at 13-1. Now, Perricard, I have to point out his draw. First round's basically a bye. He's a massive favorite there as Perricard into the first rounds against Sun. You're looking at him against Hanfman or a qualifier in the second round, then either Vukic, Chorich, or Martinez. So once again, pretty decent draw, and then you might have to face off against Bublik in the quarters, or I should say the semis, facing off against either him or Shang or Nishikori or Safulin. Point is, though, for the bottom half of the draw, I don't mind that path for Perricard. And if the serve's going to be on, I think it can definitely result in a lot of easy holds, and I do think he can win some breakers. So 13-1, yes, I know he's been in bad form lately. I get it, but I'm hoping the time off maybe did him some good. To give him the reset button, but I do think his serve should be one of the most dangerous weapons here at the event, so I'm going to go with him at 13-1. So once again, my outright picks for Chengdu, keeping it pretty light, staying away from the immediate favorites, but I'm going to go with Bublik at 850, going to go with Sonego at 9-1, and I am going to go with Perricard at 13-1 as my quote-unquote long shot for the event. Before we get into Hangzhou, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Fantasy because they have a pick'em, which is always adding awesome items to the menu. They now have first touchdown protections, so there are a ton of ways to win in the NFL with college football as well, MLB, MMA, and more. Their lobby is jam-packed with profit boosts and no sweat entries. You can now use their specials and boosts on all your flex entries. And a reminder for the upcoming card tonight, I think I'm going to go to the WNBA. So I think I am going to go with this one. What do I want to go with? There was a lot that I actually liked from the WNBA gambling podcast. You know what? I think for this one, I am going to go with Alicia Gray. We'll go with Alicia Gray, higher 1.5 threes in the game tonight against the Sky. So I'll go with that as our option for the entry. Reminder, though, that when you do sign up, use the promo code SGPN to claim your special for getting a first-time positive offer up to $1,000 bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through Chengdu outright, so now it's time to move on into Hangzhou. Now, for the usual breakdown, we talk about the tournament history first with recent winners. However, that doesn't exist because this is a brand new tournament. It's replacing the Suhai Open. So, point is that this is a brand new event. Unveiling, cut the red tape. Point is, it is time to break down a new event. So it's going to be a bit tricky to actually tell what the court should be like. I'm assuming it'll be similar to Chengdu, Don't have confirmation on that, so we're going to have to see how that plays out. Maybe watch a qualifying match or two, or at least maybe a couple games to gauge the actual speed of the courts. But point is, brand new event. Well, we'll see how it goes. Point is, though, not much to go based on history. So going to the outrights for the actual odds here. You have Rune as the favorite at around plus 300. You have Kashanov at around 550. Nakashima, who's regained form recently, at 650. You have Zhang as the home country favorite at 11-1. You have Nishioka at 11-1. Echeverry's 12-1. Morozan's 14-1. Bellucci is 18-1. Darderi's 18-1. Mutet is 22-1. Shevchenko's 22-1. Bu is 25-1. Wu is 25-1. So Yibing is back, which is definitely nice to see. I know that he was pretty successful in challengers. Nice to see him, though. Of course, he won a title last year. Point is, though, he has been injured, so nice to see him back. Solid hardcore player. Should be dangerous if he is healthy in this event. You're looking at Hichikata, though, 25-1. Chilich is back at 28-1. Nardi, 30-1. You kind of get the point. If you want to go for some veterans that are serious long shots, you have Karatsev at 40-1, Baena at 50-1, and Gaston at 50-1 as well. So going through my thoughts for the actual event, going through the initial favorites again, Rune I am not taking. First of all, we saw him get killed by Nakashima in the first round of the US Open, and coincidentally, there might be a potential matchup there in the, I believe, semis, I think. So point is, Nakashima might be on the same path that Rune is, and if they have another collision course, I saw Nakashima kill the guy in hardcourt about a couple weeks ago. So I think that Nakashima has some value, but Rune can't take. 3-1 for a guy that's been in free fall for the last couple months, and I think he should be able to get past his immediate section, even though Nishioka can always make it interesting on hardcourt. But Rune I don't trust, so I'm not going to take him at 3-1. Don't see any value on that price. Moving on, though, you have Kashanov at 6-1, give or take, who has been rough recently, but I am going to take him at 6-1. I saw him look pretty solid in the US Open. I know he lost in the first round. Was the longest match in US Open history, so he did look a bit sharper, lost to Evans in 5. Point is, though, I did like what I saw, and I do think that when you're looking at a guy I think you're looking at a guy who's historically speaking good on hardcourt, and he has been kind of having a rough year. I think it's a very good draw for him. If you want to talk about the actual, I'd say, weakness of the overall field, Kashanov, who was struggling physically for a couple months, then he had a 5-set marathon, the longest match in the history of the US Open. Fitness-wise, he should be fine. So I think you're looking at a guy who might be in a pretty good spot to win his second title of the year. A reminder, he won in Doha earlier this year. But Kashanov has a bye, then Gaston or Bu, then Darderi, Kukushkin, Shevchenko, or a qualifier, then potentially facing off against either Zhang or Echeverry. It's a very easy draw for Kashanov. I know that he's been rough over the last couple of months, but 6-1 is a good price when you really lay out the draw. So I am going to go with him at 6-1 for this one. Looking at the other options, I am going to go with Nakashima at 750. I kind of have to. Mentioned before that he killed Rune in the US Open, and there's a potential matchup there in the semis. So with him having a pretty easy draw initially, he might face off against Yibing, though, in the second round, which is a bit tricky, but Yibing hasn't played any ATP events recently, so I am wondering if he will be able to make the jump from challengers to ATP events seamlessly, if there's going to be a bit of a transitional struggle. But I think Nakashima has been playing some good tennis. The serve was great, and I think you're looking at a guy who's starting to piece together some of that top 25 upside that we saw a couple years ago. But I like Nakashima for the price, not scared by either Hichikata or Morozan or Nardi. And we did see Nakashima beat Rune on hardcourt a couple weeks ago. So decent path there for Nakashima as well. If you think he gets by Yibing, that might be a very fun matchup, though, in the second round. So keep an eye out for that one. But I am going to go Nakashima at this price at $750. For the last one, I am going to go with the home country guy. Wanted to go for a long shot. Didn't really like many of the super ones again. So I am going to kind of go with the home country guy. Give me Zhang at 13-1. Yes, he got injured in his US Open match against Draper, but we saw Draper was killing him anyway, and Draper made the semis anyway, so that loss actually looked better over the, I'd say, course of the tournament. But the point is, Zhang, assuming he's healthy, has a decent draw as well, and he has a good serve, which could translate to the courts here, but he would face off against either a qualifier in the first round, then Karatsev or Bellucci in the second round, then Mutet, Baena, or Echeverry. decent path, but it's mostly based on the home country angle. Felt like taking a flyer with somebody, and I do think that Zhang has some talent. We know that he has not been the greatest health-wise over the last couple weeks, but I do think the time off helped him, and I think that him returning to China to play in the ATP events here might do him some good, I'd say, emotionally and mentally. So I am going to go with Zhang at 13-1. Thought about once again going Yibing. I need a bigger sample. I know he's a very solid hardcore player, but I didn't like the draw for him, and I wanted to see him play a couple ATP events before pulling the trigger. So give me Zhang at 13-1 as my final outright. So once again, my picks for the outrights for Chengdu and for Hangzhou. For this one, the outrights for Chengdu. Going to go with Bublik at 850. Going to go with Sunigo at 9-1, and I am going to go with Pericard at 13-1. For the Hangzhou event, I am going to go with the outrights of Kashanov at 6-1. I'm going to go with Nakashima at 750, and I am going to go with Zhang as the home country guy at 13-1. That's going to wrap it up. Apologies, we had no quarter odds. Not really anything I could do about it, but it is what it is. Now it's time to get into the lock and dog picks for the first round. But for that, remember once again that we are brought to you by BetUS, because BetUS is a brand new sponsor. And a reminder that they've been around for over 30 years. Bet anywhere, BetUS is available in a ton of locations, including internationally. They also launched a brand new live betting experience. And a reminder that you can easily deposit through crypto and get lightning fast payouts. And a reminder that you should use our link to sign up. Get 125% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits. But at sportsgambuckets.com/BetUS, sportsgambuckets.com/BetUS, promo code SGPN. So know we send you BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. A reminder that if you do want to try building your own model for sports betting, Rhythm can help you with that, because Rhythm can help bettors of all levels build custom predictive models in seconds. And a reminder that they give you predictions on money line, spread, totals, and props. Rhythm AI had a great NFL Week 2, 22.5% ROI on NFL spread bets, and a 44.3% ROI on NFL money line bets. Build your own model. Copy one of the top performing models as a second option from the leaderboard, or press build a model for me, and Rhythm will give you predictions on every game with player props and also a ton of stats, research, and trend analysis to give you even more betting insights. A reminder though, if you want to try for free, you can get a free 7-day free trial by using the link sportsgambuckets.com/rhythm, sportsgambuckets.com/RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished going through Chengdu and Hangzhou outrights. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go to a matchup between a guy that we love on the show and Marter. Going to go with Nishioka. We're going to take him -3.5 games, a -110. Couple reasons why. First of all, we know Nishioka is a very solid and underrated hardcore player. He has 3 career ATP titles on hardcourt, and we saw one of them happen this year where we gave him out as an outright. A point is, though, Nishioka's been better recently, and I do think that he is extremely talented on hardcourt, where Marter is really not. Marter has lost 7 of his last 9 ATP hardcourt matches, so I do think he's going to struggle facing off against Marter, against Nishioka. Plus, stylistically, not the best matchup for Marter, because Nishioka does not really commit many unforced errors. Keeps the ball in play, and I do think that he's going to force Marter to hit the ball past him. Marter does have a tendency to start spraying unforced errors, so I can see a lot of self-inflicted wounds over the course of this matchup, where Nishioka keeps the ball in play, dares Marter to outlast him in the rallies, and I just don't see that happening. So give me Marter to struggle, plus to face off one time this year. One time in their careers in 2022. Face off on clay, and Marter only won 4 games in the event. In the match, I am aware that was a couple years ago, but I am going to mention it because it's the only head-to-head meeting, and it's also Marter's best surface. So with that being the case, it does seem like Nishioka is a bad matchup, just based stylistically on how the two play. So I am going to go with Nishioka -3.5 games here at -110 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to a matchup between Baena and Moutet, and for this one, I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets at +145. 2 of the last 3 head-to-head meetings did not end in straight sets, so they tend to have a bunch of long rallies, and they tend to kill each other. So I see that happening here in this one. Now, Baena, we know, is not a great hardcore player, did win a round in the U.S. Open. Point is, though, he did just win a Clay Challenger title, so I do think that he's in pretty good form, which might end up resulting in him winning, I'd say, at least a set in this one. But the point is, you kind of have an interesting dynamic here, because Moutet is 4-1 lifetime. Most of the matchups have been competitive, But you are looking at Baena, who was busy in the Challenger circuit during the break that we just had between the U.S. Open and now. So he's been active, and he won a title. So I like his current form. Moutet, not so much. We saw him losing the U.S. Open early, did not play since. So I do think that you might see Moutet come out flat. Maybe Baena wins a set. Moutet is the better hardcourt player, but I think that with that kind of balancing act between potential rust and being in good form, you might see a marathon. And I think with that being the case, there is some value here at plus 145. So with that being the case, I am going to go with the over 2.5 sets between Baena and Moutet. We saw them face off on clay a couple months ago. That match also went to a deciding set. So I see that happening again. Give me the over as my dog. So once again, the picks for the show, the lock's going to be on Nishioka, minus 3.5 games and minus 110 against Martera. And for the dog, I am going to go with Baena and Moutet over 2.5 sets at plus 145 on Caesars. That's going to wrap it up. You can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the WNBA show. Playoffs are around the corner. So once again, if you want some WNBA playoff opinions, check out the WNBA Gambling Podcast with Terrell and I. Also, a reminder, I'm on the MLB show if you want some baseball thoughts as well. Playoffs also about a month away. Till next time, find me on Twitter. And once again, a reminder before I forget, don't forget to like, subscribe on YouTube. And a reminder, don't forget to leave a rating and review for the podcast on Spotify or Apple. We're back once again for the quarterfinals in this event. We're going back to the old format. Unfortunately, not a 1,000 event, so we are not going to cover each round of the event, or it's not a Grand Slam, obviously. So we're going to be back for the quarterfinals in a couple days. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.